Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He has worked for WCW and is currently a coach with AEW. I'm pleased to welcome the one and only Glacier. Welcome
What's
to
up,
Wrestling with
guy?
Heart.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Now talk to me about your childhood. Where are you from?
You know what? I was born and raised in Brunswick, Georgia, which is kind of on the east coast of South Georgia. It's about an hour above Jacksonville, Florida. So I was kind of grew up right on the Georgia-Florida line, and I was, lived there, grew up, was a huge wrestling fan growing up. My twin brother and my dad was a big wrestling fan, and so it's when you're a kid, what your parents are into, you typically are into as well, and
It's in the blood.
it's in the blood, yeah. And so I fell in love with wrestling. Um, my dad would take us to the Jacksonville Coliseum, which is a legendary arena for wrestling back in the day, and then I grew up loving wrestling. Uh, got into martial arts, got into football. Signed a football scholarship to go play college football at Valdosta State University, which is about 2 hours away from home, and went played ball there. And I know don't want to get too far ahead of us, real quick, in our talk here, but then I got into wrestling right after about the time I got ready to graduate college, and 37 years later, here I am. So
Yeah, I mean, he's surrounded by athletics and sports from such a young age, getting the chance to be in football and doing all kinds of martial arts. Um, I'm sure that had to prepare you for the world of wrestling because it's physicality, it's combat
yeah.
sport, and so you're around so many other people. Did you know at a young age you wanted to be in the wrestling business, or did that come on later on?
The funny thing is that my brother and I, like a lot of young wrestling fans, we dreamed of, and we always talked about being the NWA World Tag Team Champions one day, and because the NWA, that's what Georgia Championship Wrestling and Championship Wrestling from Florida, that's what they operated under that banner of the NWA, and so and this was back in the 3 channel days, so that's really all we knew, so. But we really did. My brother and I, there's a great saying in wrestling where people say, like, what does it mean to be over in wrestling? And I learned a long time ago, the best definition I ever heard of that is when a wrestling fan wants to be you. That's what it means to be over in wrestling. Not be like you, but be you. And so my brother and I, we really wanted to be the NWA World Tag Team Champs because there were two brothers, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, who were they were the Florida Tag Team Champs, and they became the NWA champs. So it was something that at that time felt very real to me. That's what I wanted to do. As I got older, my focus really shifted a lot to martial arts training. I had two martial arts instructors who became very, very instrumental in my life as mentors, and great friends and role models. I had the best parents you could ever hope to have. We grew up in a very loving home, but my two instructors, they're both still alive. They're both in their mid 80s, and I wouldn't mess with either one of them still today. But yeah, and so as I got older, I focused more. I still watched wrestling, focused more on martial arts, focused more on football. And then once I got to football, college, and I got older, we would still, we would all joke around and still watch wrestling, but at that point, because Championship Wrestling Florida back in that day had a really, really strong reputation of if you wrestled in Florida and in Georgia, like you were like a really super rough and tumble guy. And so I honestly, when I got to the point where I got, the opportunity to train in wrestling, I literally, kind of respectfully, turned it down because I was like, I don't know if I'm tough enough to do that. I mean, it had that kind of reputation, throughout the South. And fortunately, I had some people that believed in me. And I did take that step, and I'm really glad I did. It changed my life.
Well, I'm sure that karate or any kind of martial arts, when you're using your body for self-defense, it teaches you that discipline, teaches you, all these life lessons and skills that help prepare you for something like wrestling because it's combat physicality. You're working with your opponent, dance partner, and so you're basically trying to come up with different techniques to put on a show, to put on a
Yeah,
match for an audience. So I'm
right.
sure uh, doing karate or doing all kinds of martial arts taught you some stuff.
I did, yeah. And you know what? Once again, I always go back to I give my parents credit first. It was just me, my brother and I. We're the only two kids, and both my parents were in law enforcement, and that's really how we got introduced to martial arts. Like most kids of our era, we saw a Bruce Lee movie, and we were like, "Hey, we want to learn how to do that," you know. And so my father, had enough of a common sense to say, "Okay, well, let me go see who's teaching and find out where it might be a good fit for you guys." And he found the two instructors who we ended up studying under, who were in Brunswick, Georgia. Even to this day, there's what they call the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where law enforcement comes from all over the country, all over the world to train there. And like I always said, my parents, because they were in law enforcement, they didn't make it. We didn't have a whole lot of money. They didn't make a lot of money. We didn't have a whole lot, as far as materialistic things. But we had a lot of love in our house, and both my parents they brought us up on a good, strong work ethic. And then, that just got reinforced by the coaches I had in football, my two instructors. And so, and as I got older, Stanley, that was the one thing that I realized where I had an edge on when I was playing football, because I wasn't necessarily the super big guy, even though I was an offensive lineman. I was, I always say, like, I'm 6'2". I'm not super tall. I was never super fast. I was never super strong. I couldn't jump really high, but where my parents instilled this work ethic, and all of my mentors did the same thing. They reinforced that. So what I realized is that where I could get my edge, and I just did a wrestling seminar this weekend, and I talked about, if you kind of use the analogy of sprinters, on the track, for track and field, the ones to gain the advantage, you want to get to the inside track. That's where you can gain the advantage. And that was where I felt like, my work ethic got me to the inside track on a lot of people who may have been like, in theory, 2 or 3 lanes out, because it was ingrained in me that, hard work pays off, and it really did for me in so many ways. And by the time I got into pro wrestling, that's really what I feel like happened too, was there were a lot of great young talents that were out there, where I saw that I started to gain the edges. I was really willing to do the work, so to speak, and when a lot of other people maybe weren't. And that's something I really hang my hat on, and I say that very humbly and proudly.
And if you put enough effort into something that you really love to do, you can make it in anything that you
Yeah,
desire. And so,
yeah.
fell in love with wrestling. Talk to me now about the training process. Did you notice any differences between wrestling training versus football or martial arts training? Because there are some similarities, but did you notice any differences when you were
Oh yeah,
made
yeah.
the
I
transition into
And I
wrestling?
was very fortunate. As I get older, you learn life lessons, and as they say, you get older and wiser. You hope, but when I was, we finished up. I got redshirted my first year because of injury, so I ended up I played 5 years of college football, or had 5 years of eligibility, and redshirted my first year, even though I was still actively, or I had knee surgery, so I was recovering from that. So I got an extra year. So, by my fifth year, one of my best buddies at the time was my teammate. We played side by side. I played center. He played right guard. He was a great athlete, great player named R.D. Swain. And which sounds like a great football name and a great wrestling name. But there was a wrestling show that taped at the local TV station right there in Valdosta, Georgia. And one of my former teammates from football was from Jacksonville, Florida. And one of his buddies, high school buddies, had gotten into pro wrestling. A gentleman who's still a great friend of mine to this day, Rick Allen, and he wrestled as Sandy Beach and WWF back in the day. And so he had gotten into championship wrestling from Florida. He broke in through there. And so as I got to know him, I was very interested in, like, man, how was that process? And so I kind of got to hear that firsthand from him. And then he introduced me to a great journeyman wrestler by the name of Fred Avery. And we're all still great friends to this day. And so we started wrapping up our senior year of football, which was in the fall of 1986. They started talking to us about, hey, would you guys be interested in training to wrestle? And I promise you, my first reaction was, heck no, I'm not tough enough to do that. And fortunately, they talked us into giving it a try. But you got to remember too, back then, they didn't have pro wrestling schools like they do now. It was still a very, very protected business, especially in Georgia and Florida. I mean, it was, you if you were in that inner circle, you didn't dare say it was anything but 100% real, and so they really protected the business, that which I really respected about that. As once I got in and realized how fortunate I was to be invited into that business by guys who really knew what they were doing. But I can tell you honestly, when we trained with Fred, we literally, hey, he had an old, boxing style ring that we had to set up and break down every time we trained. And we set it up in his backyard in South Georgia. So we started training in April of '87, about 2 months before I graduated college. And we used to set it up and the ring would be kind of uneven. So like if you got going too fast on one side and ran downhill, you might rip your ear off going through the ropes. But I do remember this. I remember, and this is as if it were 5 minutes ago. I remember after he put us through the ringer that first day of working out, I remember, rolling out, sitting on the edge of the ring. And I remember just saying to myself, man, I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this, but I have just found what makes me come alive. And from that moment on, as much as I loved, football, it was a defining moment in my life. Like, okay, because I was, once again, I had taken college football as far as I could take it. But I was realistic enough, and I wasn't, I just didn't have the size to be considered to go to the next level of the NFL or the Canadian Football League or anything like that. And honestly, once I found wrestling, I didn't really want to do football anymore. I was all in on being a pro wrestler at that point.
Once you know that you've done something for a period of time and you really enjoy it and it clicks,
Yeah,
it's next gear, it's next level. So
yeah,
you're
it is.
basically you basically have to take that passion, put all your energy into it, and go for it. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
and I'll tell you this. It's just funny how things work out. I was very, very fortunate to where by the time my fifth year of college football came around, I had come up with a whole bunch of guys that we all were seniors together. We were on the first team in 1982. We started the football program at Valdosta State, and now Valdosta State has won several national championships. It's one of the best, Division II programs in the country. And we had like, gosh, I don't know, it was like 20, 23 seniors or something on our team. We had a loaded senior team, and we ended up going 9-2 my senior year, which is by far the best record in the history of the program at that point. And we just ended on a tremendous note. So it was a good point in my life to kind of put football to bed, because I finished on a very high note with all the guys I'd started with, which is pretty cool.
when you're doing these drills and you're working with different coaches and trainers, I'd imagine it's intense. All the drills and workouts. Do you
Oh
recall
yeah.
any pieces of advice that your trainers gave you that you've applied to today in your own coaching?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I just said this at the seminar this past weekend. One of my our head coach at Valdosta, and he was there for the first 3 years, and then but he always had a great saying, because I mean, coming in the first year and we're starting a new program is really, really hard. And we had to go through a lot of challenges that most established programs don't have to go through. We didn't have a big budget back then. I mean, when I go back to the university now, they got the best of everything. I mean, and that's what happens when you win, several national championships. But we had very bare bones stuff to start with, and and anybody's ever been to South Georgia in the middle of the summer, it's not only is it ungodly hot, it's ungodly humid too. So it's not a pleasant experience, let me tell you, as far as dealing with the conditions. But he always used to have a great saying. Jim Goodman, who was my first head coach and who I'm still close to this day, which tells you a whole lot about the relationships that he built 40 years ago, is he always said, if you stay, you'll play. If you stay and you put in the work and you believe in what we're doing, I know that eventually you'll find a way. You'll work into a position where you'll play. And I tell wrestlers that all the time now, because for whatever reason, we live in a culture now where everybody wants immediate gratification. And professional wrestling is the type of thing that It literally, I've learned over the years, it, even the best of athletes for this business, it's about 3 years you want to really have to kind of really work and train and get used to all the pressure that comes with professional wrestling before you're ever really ready. I've never seen anybody that, in my opinion, I've seen people who've gotten out there like within a year or two, but I still, when I look at them, I don't think they really things really clicked until about that third year. Most people, it's about 5 years, and maybe longer. And a lot of young talent today, they're just not that patient. They get about 3 years in, and the big break hasn't happened yet. And then all of a sudden, they start becoming what we call in the wrestling business bitter. And I tell them all the time, like, we got enough bitter people in the wrestling business. We don't need any more. But I always say, it's I really believe it's like being a musician, being an actor, any kind of performer. You got to love it first. You can want the fame and fortune, but you got to have a passion for it first, because it's a very much of a business of peaks and valleys, of a lot of highs and lows, and it's one thing that, I mean, most people in this business don't make it to the level where they become a star. So when I say most, I'm saying, you know over 95% of them don't ever become a household name or make a good living doing this. And you have to know going in and be honest with yourself. Those are the odds, and you got to, but then you got to say, all right, am I willing to work harder than everybody else, and so I can get on that inside track, and I've seen it. It makes a difference when people do.
Yeah, hard work is definitely the key. Practice is
Yeah.
definitely what's going to get you to that next level. And so, you trained, you make your debut. I'd imagine you were nervous, or
Oh yeah.
yeah,
We had, once again, my buddy R.D. Swain and I, we broke in as a tag team. We trained as a tag team. I don't know if anyone else has ever really. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of two guys, or girls coming, from whatever world they came into and train in wrestling as a tag team. So in Valdosta State, our mascot, or whatever you want to call it, we were the Valdosta State, University Blazers. So when we started, we did kind of a football gimmick. We were football pants. We carried helmets to the ring, and we just wore the Blazers, which helped because in the territory of the Southeast, Valdosta State had built a good name by then as far as the Blazers, not just in football, but we had a great baseball, basketball program. So that name was kind of not, that brand was known. So that it was kind of like a no brainer for us to kind of come in with that. And then within the first few years, I realized that we were going to have, if we were going to really have an honest opportunity, we would have to go where the opportunity is, and that was Atlanta, Georgia, because that's where WCW was. And I told RD that. I was like, hey, look, they're not going to come knock on our door in Valdosta, Georgia. We're going to have to go to them, and I got my degree in teaching and education, and I was teaching school, wrestling on the weekends, and I applied, and I was very fortunate to get a teaching job in Marietta, Georgia. And I ended up moving. At the time, RD wasn't ready to make that move, and eventually he never did make the move, and it just made sense for us as friends, and where our visions were, that we kind of decided to separate and go and try, kind of work more singles, and we would occasionally come back as tag team, and then eventually RD, he got a really great job. He started working for law enforcement there in Valdosta, which I think he's getting ready to retire right now, but he stayed with that. And so he eventually kind of phased out of wrestling, and I stayed with it. But my big break took me almost 10 years. I mean, I broke in April of 87. My big break didn't come to January of 96. I mean, literally almost 10 years later. So I was patient. I practiced what I preach.
yeah. I mean, you came in at a time when wrestling was really starting to take off in the '90s. It was the Monday
Yeah.
Night Wars,
Yep.
WCW, WWE. Monday Nitro had just got on the air on
Yep.
TNT, and
Yep.
so you came out as Glacier.
Yep.
Talk to me about who came up with the gimmick and character, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it was nothing like had been done like that at that time, and never even today. I mean, it's uh, the elaborate links that we went to do all that. It's here we are, almost 30 years later, and it still stands out as something pretty special. But man, my favorite saying, my favorite quote in the whole world, it was given to me by my college athletic trainer Jim Madaleno, and he goes, he remember him saying to me, he was Ray, I'm sure you've heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And I said, yes, yeah, of course I have. And he said, well, I think there's another part of that that makes it a whole lot more real and more true. And I was like, okay, what's that? He said, Well, he goes, it's not necessarily, it's not always about who you know, or not, it's not always about what you know or who you know, but it's also about who's willing to say they know you, who's willing to put their name and reputation on the line for you to give you maybe an opportunity or give you a leg up. And I never forgot that. It just hit me and it stuck with me all those years. And once again, that's where I realized, okay, if I'm willing to do the work and I'm willing to concentrate on things I can control and really, really just work hard, people will see that. And people in the wrestling industry, like any other industry, they see that and they talk, And so when I moved to Atlanta in 1990, one of my other one of the strongest forces in my life is a gentleman named Chip Smith. I met Chip when I was a teenager in Brunswick, and Chip has gone on to be one of the top sports performance trainers in the world. He's got a legendary career built mainly around doing NFL combine training, and he's trained Hall of Famers like Brian Urlacher, Champ Bailey, to Jalen Hurts. He trained Jalen a few years ago. I mean, he's trained that level of people, and he was the one that taught me that you got to concentrate on what you can control. Because the other stuff will you'll drive you nuts if you let it. The stuff you can't control. But Chip had a Gold's Gym in Atlanta. He sold that to Lex Luger and Sting, and they rebranded it Main Event Fitness, and they moved it to Marietta, Georgia. They had two locations. They shut one down, but they moved it. They concentrated on the Marietta, Georgia one. So when I moved to Atlanta, that was already in place. So obviously, I was smart enough to go join Main Event Fitness as soon as I got to Marietta, Georgia. And through the indie circuit, I was building a really good name and reputation on the indie circuit. And I got to know all the guys, especially one being Diamond Dallas Page. And back then, Dallas was still coming up. He was still trying to, he was fighting to be noticed, in the early 90s. And but Dallas made a lot of tracks, because of his hard work and work ethic. And so as that happened, our friendship strengthened. I would always ask him, like, hey, how can I get in front of Eric Bischoff? Because Eric was the head of the company. Him and Dallas were great friends. They literally lived about 3 or 4 houses down from each other. I would always be over at Dallas's house, so watching tapes and everything. And it was one of those things where it was a timing thing. And then eventually, Dallas and I, Christmas of 95, we were Christmas shopping together. And I realized that I had never really talked to him about my martial arts background. So we're eating lunch and at a pizza place. And I said, Dallas, I'm thinking about putting some of my martial arts into my wrestling gimmick. And I never forget what he said. He had a slice of pizza, and he was like, "Well, bro, that'd be great if you knew some of that stuff." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And then I realized I had never really talked to him that much about it. And when I gave him all the background about all of it, he's like, "Bro, like I didn't know any of that. Eric's into all that." And so he went back and told all that to Eric, and that's what piqued Eric's interest. I had actually had a couple impromptu meetings with Eric. Like Dallas used to have these legendary Christmas parties, and I talked to Eric at the parties and stuff, but nothing ever really came of it. And so once Eric heard that, he said, I want to meet with him after the Christmas break. So it came like the first week of January of 96. And I literally met him at a little restaurant right there in their neighborhood. I think it was maybe like a Longhorn restaurant or something like that, but we met kind of in the back. I went in thinking it was just going to be, a dinner to kind of talk to Eric, kind of like informally. And long story short, we met for what I remember to be almost 3 hours. And, from beginning to end, because we talked about all the martial arts stuff and the people we kind of, both knew of and just the circles of that we ran in, and the people we knew. And I had a really great conversation with him. And then at the end of that conversation, he said, well, I want to sign you to a deal with WCW. And obviously I'm giving you the very abbreviated version of all that night. And at the time I had gone to work for Chip Smith. Chip was the athletic director of the Atlanta Athletic Club, which is still to this day one of the most prestigious country clubs in America. And I was the fitness director under Chip. And so I had a really good job. And so when the opportunity came, I told him, I said, well, I can't just leave this job right now. I said, I definitely, I'm on board, but, what kind of game plan can we get? And he said, do this. So I don't, I'm not asking you to quit your job just yet. He goes, but I just wanted to get you signed to a deal. He goes, and he asked me, he said, are you still wrestling on the independent wrestling scene? I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, here's what I want you to do. He said, I want you to call and cancel whatever bookings you have. I just want you to just completely disappear from the independent wrestling scene and don't explain to anybody, just disappear for a while. And I looked right at him and I said, I could do that. And so, but through that, the way that everything got started, as far as actually us constructing and you know putting everything, as I always say, from on the drawing board to finished product, was I had worked on. I'd gotten into training as an actor, taking on camera film classes, acting classes, and through that, I worked on a couple, low budget independent films that were just, like in very small roles and stuff. I ended up meeting a young man named Andre Frides who had a special effects studio called AFX Studios. And once again, it's who's the one to say they know you. I said to Eric, hey, I got this guy who's really talented, special effects guy, and he can make costumes and he can do everything, and he does it for TV and film. He may be the guy who can help us, put all this, bring this to life. So they met. He ended up hiring Andre through WCW to create from finished, what I call drawing board to finished product, the whole persona of Glacier. And then, of course, he went on to do the whole persona for Mortis, then for Wrath, and then for Ernest the Cat Miller. So Andre played a really big part in all of that. And I tell you, Andre went on to get tons and tons of work out of that through WCW and then WWE. His name and reputation in studio has grown so much. I mean, he works on tons and tons of major film projects. Because everything films in Atlanta now, or at least a lot films in Atlanta. So anyway, yeah, so it's funny. I mean, just through relationships and I was able to make that introduction. And at that time, no one in wrestling ever had a special effects studio come in and design their gimmick. I mean, it was all upon the wrestler to do it, and it pretty much that kind of came across on camera. I mean, Flair had his robes and stuff like that, but that was about as much of a spectacle as it, and Sting would wear, kind of his stuff but even that was stuff that was kind of, made by seamstresses and stuff. It wasn't anything that was an elaborate look, So yeah, that was kind of how it all started. And it was a long process back and forth to kind of mold it from literally, just an idea. And obviously we played off of, as wrestling does. Wrestling always plays off what's popular in culture and society and culture. And of course, the Mortal Kombat video game had been, unbelievably popular. I think at this time, the movie had come out. And that's really what I found later was that the Midway company, who owned the rights to all the Mortal Kombat stuff, they were talking to TBS about bringing, a TV series to life. And that's what happened was, if you remember, Mortal Kombat TV series aired on TNT. So that's kind of how it all started. I know that was a very long-winded answer, so I apologize. But,
no, it's fine. It's good. The best wrestling gimmicks I feel are ones that are a view with the volume turned up, and
yeah,
with your background, martial arts, karate, combined with some of the more video game-esque
yeah.
kind of content that was huge and popular. Definitely
Yeah. Well,
worked
it's
out.
funny. It's what I always, tell aspiring young wrestlers, because that's what I do a lot is I help with a lot of them, explaining them how do you create a gimmick, and I don't like to use the word character that it seems to be used a lot in wrestling now. And I get it. I understand. But to me, it's more of a persona. And like you said, I was very fortunate to get mentored by some of the very best in the history of this business. But and I was always out of that same school of thought is, to me, the ones who seem to be the most believable, relatable, memorable were the ones who, that just seemed like their personality got turned up when they were in front of the wrestling audience. And that's kind of, who they were when I would meet them, even as a wrestler. It just volume would kind of be turned back down some. A perfect example would be like, Dusty Rhodes, and but what what I always say is the great thing about when you're creating your persona in the world of professional wrestling, you have three options. Your persona can be 100% factual. It can be your real life, everything from your real life. You can just be that person with the volume turned up, or it can be 100% fictional. You can make it all up and just and it can be a layer of your personality that's already there, but you just haven't shown the world yet. And that happens a lot in wrestling. That's what I think the beauty of wrestling is. It allows people to kind of show another layer of their personality that they probably wouldn't show anywhere else. But also, it can be a combination of the two. It can be some factual and some fictional, and you mold those together, which is how the persona of Glacier came to be. Bischoff really liked the part of the story of my family history of law enforcement. My parents, my twin brother, my two uncles, they were all in law enforcement. So he liked that. He wanted to keep that part of my story and in my martial arts training. But then we kind of wove in some stuff about me traveling to Japan and training under this old master and getting this helmet. And so a lot of that stuff was kind of, we kind of pulled that into some of the fictional stuff and factual stuff molded together to create the persona of Glacier. And then what I realized along the way was the person that the Glacier would become is someone who's very stoic, very super focused, very determined, martial arts warrior type of wrestler, and he's someone who never smiles. Because he's intensely focused, not because he's a jerk. He's very focused on what the task is at hand, which is getting to the ring and beating the opponent, whoever that is. Ray Lloyd is the guy who smiles all the time and laughs all the time. Glacier never smiles, but because he's intensely focused and very, very determined to do whatever he's going to do. And that's who I was as a competitor, as a football player, as a martial artist. So I just took that layer and just kind of made that more visible, to the wrestling world.
Yeah, you have to really get into character and be in that
Yeah.
mode when you're on, when that
Right.
red light is
Right.
on, you have to. And then when you're off, you can be yourself. And
Yeah, and
so
that's what I tell people all the time that we are different to our fans. We are different than just actors playing a character. Tom Cruise, can play Pete Maverick of Top Gun, and but when someone meets Tom Cruise, they know they're meeting Tom Cruise, and they want to meet Tom Cruise. When wrestling fans meet us, I promise you, because I know for a fact there's not any wrestling fans out there that care to meet Ray Lloyd. They don't. Ray Lloyd to them is very boring. When they meet me, they want to have an experience with Glacier, not Ray Lloyd, who may be worried about, paying all my bills for this month and they got to go home and cut the grass and do all that stuff. They want to have an experience with Glacier, that persona that I project to the wrestling world. And it's very important that wrestlers understand that you have two layers of your personality and which ones the wrestling fan wants to have an experience with if you get a chance to interact with them. And that's the difference between wrestlers, in my opinion, wrestlers and actors, TV and film actors, is that they play a character and then they put that character on the shelf. And for us, it's a lot deeper than a character. Like I said, it's another layer of our personality, a persona, so that when we do meet the wrestling fan, that shows through. We're able to kind of turn that switch on, but seamlessly to them, so that we give them the experience that they want, which is with that person that they see when they watch wrestling.
do you feel it's harder now with the advent of the internet and social media to have a character that you can be deemed as like real to the fan? Do you feel it's
I do. I think it's harder, but I think a lot of people they set themselves up and they make it harder on themselves because uh, you know if especially if you have a wrestling persona that's one that is uh, radically different than just who you are as a person when you're not in that mindset. I always feel like it's fun, for the audience to see maybe something kind of halfway in the middle of that, and just like I just because I idolized Dusty growing up. Evil Knievel and Dusty Rhodes were my two childhood heroes, and I got to know Dusty and really work with him and get to know him on a personal level. And Dusty to me was a great example. Like if you ever met Dusty and he would just talk regular, he talked like you would think he would as Dusty Rhodes. But if he had to do a promo or he had to step in front of the wrestling world, you know that like the volume just got turned up. So you still got to see that. But if you happen to meet him, if you somehow met him somewhere outside of the wrestling world, you were still going to get you're going to meet that persona of Dusty Rhodes because he was just the volume was just going to get adjusted some.
Mhm.
And I feel like when people do interviews that are active right now, you're on TV right now, people are watching you, people are paying to see you. I feel like when they do, first of all, I just feel like a lot of people, like I said, if they have an elaborate gimmick to where their persona in wrestling is radically different than who they are, it's a tricky balance. It's a tricky balance because if you are going to show that other side of you, then just realize the world's going to see that, and that may make it harder for people to be able to suspend disbelief and
Mhm.
allow them to buy into your wrestling persona. So yeah, it's a little bit of a slippery slope. Definitely that was not there, back when I was coming up with, with the internet and stuff was not around. So it was a lot easier to be able to portray that persona, to the fan.
Hmm. How long were you with WCW?
I started in January '96, and I was with them pretty much right up until the end. Until what March of '01. I'd signed a 3-year deal, and then I ended up signing another 2-year deal. And so basically, by January of '01, contractually, I was done. But I had developed once again through my hard work and work ethic. Um, Jody Hamilton was the original coach that I was under with the WCW power plant. And then eventually, when we moved to a different location where everything was under one roof, all the business offices, the power plant, and everything, Paul Orndorff took over. And so I had gotten to know Paul really well. And once again, I feel like I built a strong relationship with him because I was always there, like Dallas and a lot of the other guys in our group, always there working. When we were off, we were on the road a lot. But when we were not on the road, we were not at the power plant, and because that was it. I mean, we looked at it's my job. It's my job to be in the best shape I could be, to constantly work on my skills in the ring, my craft. And so I'd gotten to a point where Paul was really campaigning for me to come on board as a coach at the power plant, and then kind of still be. I would still probably do some TV, but get paid more like per appearance at that point, but be mainly employed as a coach. And so I was kind of waiting for that to happen when we got bought out. So, and of course, everybody knows now if you've seen the Who Killed WCW and all that series, you've seen that when that the end came for us, it came pretty fast, and that's why a lot of us were caught off guard by it. So yeah, that was kind of hot. But I was there. Signing in January '96, like you said, Monday Nitro had started in I think September or October of '95.
Hmm.
So and it was already
Hmm.
getting unbelievable traction. The ratings war had already started. So that's what I always tell people too. Like I had no idea where this thing was going to go. I mean, we didn't even figure out that I was going to be Glacier until 6 or 7 months in. We finalized the name. But so the old saying is, when you get offered a seat on a rocket ship, you don't take time to ask what seat. You just get on the rocket ship, and that's what I did. And so at least I wasn't taking time to ask what seat. I just knew I wanted to be on that ship.
Yeah, I mean, WCW just had
Excuse me.
just so much history behind it and
Yeah,
the legacy of the brand. People still talk about um, what if WCW was still around today. The great wrestlers and storylines from that time period, people still remember.
yeah.
Uh, was WWE something you wanted to look into as far as going to work for them? Did you want to go to WWE?
It's funny, Paul Orndorff, he always had a great saying. He said, everyone's goal, and granted, this is when both companies were going strong. He said everyone's goal, in his opinion, should be to have a great strong run with both companies without burning any bridges. So, of course, when we got bought out, I wanted to do that. And Dusty had already started Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling in 2000, and I was working really closely with Dusty. So that was just a thrill beyond words to be working with, like I said, my childhood hero. And and so what happened was I was talking to WWE, and they actually made me an offer. And what they wanted for me to do was come in and do a state trooper gimmick, which on the surface probably would have been pretty cool. But by that time, at this point, I was I had almost 15 years of experience in the wrestling business, and I knew how the wrestling business was. And in the wrestling business, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that's off limits in the wrestling business. And I knew that was something that was very, very close to me. My dad and mom both, and my twin brother, all had very, very celebrated careers in this Georgia State Patrol. And so that was something that was because it was so close to me and I ended up, I sat down and I talked to a lot of people whose advice, whose opinion I really respected, from Dusty on down. And at the end of the day, and they weren't offering me great money. I mean, it was an okay deal, but you remember that at this point they were the only game in town, and they already had a full roster. They didn't really need to. And if you remember, they didn't really bring in a lot of people from WCW, and the ones that they did outside of Booker, they really didn't do a whole lot with really anybody else. Even Page, they didn't do a whole lot with. So I was at a point where I was actually was engaged to get married. one of my very best friends to this day at the time was a guy named Steve Day. Steve Day was Cody Rhodes' high school wrestling coach, and at Lassiter High School where Cody was at school, and so I had an opportunity. He gave me an opportunity to come back and be a teacher and coach, and then I would have my free time to work with Dusty to help build TCW. And I know a lot of people may not understand that compared to having an opportunity to go to WWE. But once again, like I said, as they say in wrestling, the downside guarantee, which is basically just your minimum that they can guarantee you, was very modest. So, but for me, it was a little too close to home. I just didn't want to, and I didn't want to go do a gimmick that where if they asked me to do something that I wasn't comfortable with, I didn't want to be in that position to say no, I'm not going to do that because of the reputation, that it might hurt my family's reputation in law enforcement or whatever. So it was just a little too close for comfort for me. So I respectfully, excuse me, respectfully declined that offer and went back to teaching and went work with Dusty, helping him full time. And I can tell you honestly, Stan, I never ever have regretted that decision. I mean, yeah, I certainly think about it how it might have been cool to have maybe a run in WWE, but who knows how that would have gone. And you can't look back, but I just know that the decision I made brought me a lot of great happiness and to get a chance to work with my childhood hero and just dive into wrestling on my terms. And what a lot of people realize too is for the better half of the better part of 5 years, I mean, that was the time we were on the road a lot back then. So after 5 years, my body and mentally, I was kind of looking for a little bit of a break, and I always say, like every wrestler, like I had it in the back of my head too, that, well, maybe there'll be another opportunity down the road that might come up. And so eventually I didn't ever get any other offer from WWE, but that was okay. I mean, by that time, because some of the people, like one of my very best friends, still to this day is Ernest the Cat Miller. And Ernest went to WWE and had a great run, And so I got to see some of my buddies really go in and have a good run, and I was able to enjoy that for them, So yeah, it was the decision I made. I've never regretted. But yeah, it still would have been nice to have a run in both companies. I'm not going to say that it wouldn't be.
Now you're with AEW. You're a coach
Yeah.
there. Talk to me how you got the gig with AEW.
Yeah, and I go back to, it's who's willing to say they know you, is thankfully I built, a really good reputation QT Marshall is he's been with AEW very much since the beginning. And Sanjay Dutt, all the wrestling world certainly knows Sanjay. Sanjay and I have known each other since way back in, I think, around 0405, because Dusty eventually went to be a head booker at TNA, and he brought me on board there when we were taping down in Orlando. Through that, I got to know Sanjay way back then. So, so when it came time I inquired about, would it be possible to, whenever they were looking maybe to bring another coach on, would I like to be considered? And thankfully I was, and it worked out. I had gone back to teaching high school actually down here in Orlando, and so I wasn't in a position of desperation, but I love wrestling. I mean, wrestling is my heart. And if there was an opportunity to get back into doing that, I certainly wanted to explore that. And I had to be patient. It took almost a year for the whole process to really work out. Luckily, it worked out to where it happened to where the opportunity was presented right around the end of the school year. And I was able to finish my school year and my contract there and come right into it. And now I've been there for about a year. And man, I love it. It's just to be around it again and to see the next generation of wrestlers and be able to offer whatever help I can to them and whether advice and just to be around some of my old friends like Jerry Lynn is a coach. I've become great friends with Scotty Garland, Scotty Too Hotty, and Dr. Luther, who's Tony Storm's sidekick out there. I mean, and there's some great relationships with people that I've had since WCW that are there, and then a lot of new friendships. And it's I thoroughly enjoy working for the company and working for Tony Khan because I tell you, Tony Khan loves wrestling at a level that I don't think I've ever seen before. I mean, he genuinely has an unbelievable level of love and passion for the wrestling business, and every time I come to work, I get to see that, and that's really cool to be at the point in my life, in my career, to be able to experience that and to be in that culture to where we're doing everything we can to do good for the wrestling business and do good for the wrestling fan. So yeah, it's a very great time for me.
There's nothing like having that feeling of going to work, doing what you love, and helping the next generation of wrestlers. What has been like your favorite part about being a coach?
Right now, because QT and we started together back in 2016. We started a wrestling school up in Atlanta called the One Fall Power Factory. It's very and once again, we started the first year. We kind of it was we were sharing a facility with an amateur wrestling club up in North Georgia, and my buddy Chip Smith, once again, who's one of the they call him the Godfather of sports performance. He had this NFL caliber, sports training facility, about 30,000 square feet. We went in, looked at that. Chip allowed us to come in and move our school there. And we ended up having a whole section of that school where we were able to put 4 rings in there. I mean, one of the best wrestling facilities and wrestling schools anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, I would say, because we got to use all of his NFL style weight rooms, all of that we had access to as well. And then in late 2020, Cody came on board and we rebranded it the Nightmare Factory. And so through all that, we started doing 12-week camps. And my greatest experience as a coach in the last recent years has been that several of the young men and women that came through our camps have gone on to perform on AEW, and some more in a full-time capacity, some kind of come in and out, some. But that to me is the best thrill, is to see some of those young men and women chasing their dream and doing well, and to know that I had just a small part in that that's to me, that's I always say, it's like, at the end of Karate Kid, when you see Mr. Miyagi just standing back there and smiling and in the shadows, like I always say, I like to try to have as many Mr. Miyagi moments as I can. So sometimes when some of the young talent that I know, as particularly that came through our program, I'll go out, if I'm not needed right there backstage, I'll go out by the curtain and I'll just watch their match live so I can see it live. And those moments like that, when I see them doing well and I see them doing what they love, I'm at that point in my career where that's what really means a lot to me now. And I was blessed enough to have a great run, and I'll live forever on YouTube. So but being a coach is something I truly enjoy doing, and I'm very thankful to QT, to Sanjay, to Tony for giving me the opportunity to be there, because I really look forward to it.
I want to switch gears now and talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. Obviously, we talk about being a coach and teacher, but you've also done stuff to help other people out in the community
Yeah.
as well. What kinds of things have you done as far as charity work is concerned?
Well, you know what? My fiance and I just got back a couple weeks ago. Not well, we had week before last. Once again, one of my other favorite sayings, Stanley, is "Do what you love, and what you love will reward you." And one of the ways I've been rewarded is I've met a lot of great people doing what I love, and one of those is country music star Steve Azar. And Steve and I met at a charity golf event. Probably 25 years ago, maybe 24, 25 years ago. Became great friends, and then about 14 years ago, him and his wife started their charity golf event that they do in his hometown of Greenville, Mississippi, and it's called the Delta Soul event, and it's a weekend event, Thursday through Sunday. He brings in all of his, celebrity friends, and we raise money for him and his wife's foundation, which is called the St. Cecilia Foundation, named after their daughter, one of their children. And what they do is all the money that we raise goes to the public school music programs throughout the state that are underfunded, that don't have the budget to get all the instruments that they need for the students. So all the money that we raise goes to that foundation, and that's how the money is spread and utilized. So that's one of the charities that I'm so proud to be a part of. And in the 14 years we've had the tournament, the charity weekend, I think I've only missed one. And the 1 year they didn't have it was just a year when we were all dealing with COVID. But as long as I can be there to help, I will, just because Steve and his wife Gwen are great friends, and it's a great cause, and I love just doing whatever I can to help that, not only help, but to bring eyes and ears to it, just to let people know that that this is something that is needs to be done, and so we're bringing awareness to that too. And then also, ever since that, because when I was young, when I was a kid, in first and second grade, I struggle terribly with dyslexia. And once again, so thankful that I had parents who were so committed to mine and my brother's growth and development and all the levels. And so my parents, mainly my mom, really dove in and just got all the resources that I needed to help me with that. And this came at a time when I was in the second grade when they were telling my parents that they don't know a whole lot about dyslexia still to this day, but back then they sure didn't know a whole lot about it. And so they were telling my parents, that I was, if you can imagine, there was a pretty harsh term that was used back then, which is called educable mentally retarded, and that's what I got labeled. And my mom just refused to accept it. She said, "No, my son is not that, and I'm going to prove to you that he's not." So she was able to get the resources where I got diagnosed properly, and then we got a game plan to work on me overcoming that, which eventually I did. And so and I say all that to say that I think because of having that struggle early in life, that I always was drawn to people with wanting to help people with challenges, whether it's physical, mental, emotional challenges. So as I got older, I got into high school to where I started trying to do just serve in however way I could, to give back. Special Olympics had kind of really gotten traction in the early '80s when I was finishing up high school, and so I volunteered for that when I was in college and after college. When I moved to Atlanta, I eventually ended up coaching a weightlifting team for the Special Olympics up there for the state games, and I've always tried to stay, available to that and to try to support it, financially or however I can, just because I love what that stands for, and the Special Olympics, motto is, let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt, and I just think that's the coolest thing in the world, And so, and then here locally, I live in a great community. My fiance Veronica and it's called Avalon Park, and one of my good friends here, he is the head of the Central Florida Miracle League, and it's a baseball league that they're all over the country now, but it's this specific baseball league designed for people with physical, mental, emotional challenges, and allowing them to come out and feel good and get outside and breathe the fresh air and participate in a baseball game like anyone like we get to do, and the Miracle League is an amazing thing, and so I'm working with my buddy Mike to really try to raise money and awareness for that here and for the division of that here in Orlando. So yeah, those are just a few of the things that I've been involved in.
Yeah, you definitely seem like you care very much about, paying it forward, and have a lot of passion for helping others. Is there like one particular memory that you have where there was coaching or helping with a function or doing something nice for someone that just made you feel good, just gave you joy inside?
You know what? Yeah, back when I was with WCW, and I got a lot of great memories, but this is the one that pops into my head first is that a good friend of mine that I grew up with, her name's Lee from Brunswick, Georgia. During my time at WCW, when everybody was watching, and we were on top of the world, there was a family in my neighborhood or my hometown. And one the she was there was a friend of Lee, and her name was Sung Hee Lewis. And Sung Hee had her and her husband had a son, Josh, who had was born with a condition called brachial plexus, where his left arm was underdeveloped, and they had been. And he needed some surgeries that were going to be quite extensive, which obviously meant they were going to be quite expensive. Um, and they were doing like I remember when I talked to Lee, they were doing spaghetti dinners to raise money. Maybe they were raising a couple $100s at a time or something. And I just thought, you know what? Like I had so many great people in my hometown that helped me become who I was. And here I'm in a position to where maybe I can bring a lot of awareness in it and raise money for them too. And so I ended up, sitting down with them. We put a game plan together, and I went back to all my buddies at WCW. And long story short, we ended up putting on a huge WCW style show at my high school gym. And we raised, I think, if I remember, and this was in '97, maybe '98. so we, it was a while back. I think we raised in one night like $23,000 was what they raised, and then after expenses, I think 15 or 16 of that was what the family was able to get, and and that that feeling of being able to use all the influence that was around me at that time, and the fact that I had my buddies Diamond Dallas Page, Brad Armstrong, all those stars were willing to come to my hometown without being paid a dime to help me raise money for some really really great people in my community, my hometown, people I'm still friends with to this day. And so yeah, that was a really cool moment. It really was. It was cool, I guess you say, full circle moment. To be able to help someone in my hometown who really needed it at the time, and they were really good people, and to be able to not only to be able to do that, and to for the rest of the whole my hometown to come out to support that, was a really special thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's incredible getting the chance to do that, especially at somewhere that you went to school and being able
yeah,
to bring all these people together for a good cause.
yeah.
Um,
And I'll tell you what, we beat it the next year, and what I'm about to tell you, I'm not exaggerating one bit. If you can imagine that I was able to pull this off, we went back and did it a second year, and the second year we did it, I brought in Goldberg to Brunswick, Georgia, during the height of his career. Bill thought, our friendship was up. He thought enough of me to, and then what happened was it was going to be in Jacksonville at a children's hospital, which was only like an hour away during that same time. And so I worked it out to where we got a private plane, fly him right up to Brunswick, and he came in and did an appearance, and he did more than an appearance, but you can imagine, bringing someone, he's a great friend even to this day, but someone of that caliber to my hometown in a high school gym for just a good family to do something. That was, I was amazed that I was able to do
yeah, I mean,
that.
it brought so many smiles to their faces to see
Yeah,
one of their heroes
yeah,
make their day. I mean, there's no better feeling than that than cheering somebody up when they're going through something. You just
yeah,
never know
absolutely,
what
absolutely.
people are going through. Um, Want to talk about your feature film that you were recently in? It's
Yeah,
talk to me about that.
yeah.
How did you get involved? And
My partner in crime, one of my best buddies in the whole world, Luther Biggs. We met at the power plant back in '96, and several years ago, he came up with the idea of us. We always wanted to. It's wrestling it's been so great to both of us, and the wrestling business as a whole is a great business. But when wrestling gets portrayed in the movies, a lot of times it's either portrayed that they show the dark side or they show the really really hokey side of it. And we were just you know determined that we wanted to make a movie that showed everything that's really great about the wrestling business: the camaraderie, the friendship, the loyalty. That's what doesn't get talked about a lot. So we decided to build a story, if you can imagine, around this really fun ride of a movie. But it really, at its core, the story is the beauty of the friendship these guys have and how much they really care about each other. They love each other like family. So it's called the Unbreakable Bunch. And I always say that it's like if you took, it's a combination of the Magnificent Seven meets John Carpenter's They Live. It's an ensemble cast, or a more modern day example would be the Expendables. But where Stallone brought all the action heroes together, we brought a bunch of wrestling heroes together in a really fun, very family friendly movie. It's out right now on all the streaming services, on it like Amazon Prime. But you can go to theunbreakablebunchmovie.com. That's our website, and all the information is there. All the streaming, everything's listed where you can see the movie and where you can rent it, where you can purchase it. And I got a shout out to Robert McLaren, he's been a dear friend for a long time. He's Diamond Dallas Page's web guy. He's been with me for almost 20 years. So he offered to do our website for free. And so it's a really, really cool website. In the movie, we got so many wrestling stars that are in the movie. There's myself, there's Larry Zbyszko, Stan Hansen, the Gangrel, David Heath, Ernest the Cat Miller, of course, King Haku, who's become a dear friend to me and Luther for all these years. And Diamond Dallas Page has a great appearance in the movie, and several others. So I don't want to ruin. There's several other ones that pop in and out. Even some current AEW stars who, when we filmed the movie, they weren't with AEW at the time yet. So, but yeah, it's a really good, fun action. It's been labeled now kind of a retro sci-fi film because what we did was try to make a movie in the spirit of John Carpenter, because we are such big fans of John Carpenter, that we wanted to make a movie that was kind of had that Escape from New York type feel, a movie that kind of could have taken place at any time. So it has a little bit of that 80s kind of action sci-fi film. And but it's a really fun ride. It's only about an hour and a half long. So if you invest an hour and a half into watching this movie, I don't think you'd be disappointed. I think you'll really be glad you did, especially if you're a wrestling fan. It's a real fun ride. And we worked really hard to give the wrestling fans something that the whole family can sit down and enjoy together. So check it out. It's the unbreakablebunchmovie.com.
All right. Well, I want to say this has been a wonderful time getting the chance to speak with you on the show. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you on social media? And I know you plugged the movie and everything.
Yep.
So if you want to plug everything again, feel free.
Yeah. And you can find me pretty much on just look for Glacier Ray Lloyd. I've got a fan page on Facebook, but I also have my personal page. You can follow me there. And I'm, Instagram, all that. It's just look for Glacier Ray Lloyd. And also, this is the first time I can give you kind of an exclusive announcement here. I am working with one of my great friends, Mike Rusciano, and Mike and I, he's been in the wrestling business for almost 20 years now, and seen and done a whole lot. We've seen and done a whole lot together in the business, but we are getting ready here we're in the process of putting together a book / instructional manual, and then getting ready to launch our website that will be more of like a membership type site later on this year. But it's going to be where be more of a community for the wrestling community to start with, for aspiring wrestlers or people who just love wrestling like we do. But it's going to be a lot of positive mindset training and conditioning and things like that, to where people can belong to some community and get some really good knowledge that we feel like can apply mainly to the wrestling business, if that's what you're looking to do with it, or whatever your endeavor is. You can apply whatever these life lessons we're going to be covering. But just, it's something that I wanted to be able to kind of go back and utilize what I learned as a school teacher and still be able to kind of feed that part of my soul, so to speak. And Mike is once again, he's been in the wrestling business for a long time, had his own very successful wrestling promotion. He's a husband and a father of these two just really cool little young boys that I always love us chatting online when we always get online together. But it's something that, once again, it's a way for us to give back and serve others. And it's something we're really excited about. So maybe I can come back on in a few months and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, Ray, I'd love to have you back on. We'll do a part 2.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. I'm so glad we finally got to do this. We've been kind of trying to get it scheduled for a while, and I appreciate your patience, man.
No problem. Like I said, we'll definitely have you back on, and we'll do a part 2 and talk about your new endeavor.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
All right. Take care.
See you, bud.
Bye-bye. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.